everybody. Welcome to the Right or Die Show. I'm your host, Randi-lee. On the show, we interview other writers and we talk about mental health from their personal journeys. If you have not already hit that like and subscribe button, go ahead, do that now so that you never miss an episode. So you've done that, right? You've hit the button. You're not missing anything. Excellent. So first, I just want to show everybody my glasses who's watching us right now. And I'm sorry for anyone who's listening. You can't see them. They're new, my toppers, and I'm in love with them because they're daisies. They're little tiny daisies. So it's the little things in life that we can appreciate. If you're always waiting for something big to happen, you could be waiting a very long time. So appreciate all that little stuff. All right, let's introduce our guest. We have Brian Fleming with us today. Hello.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm good. How are you?
I've had worse days and better days, but today's one of the great ones. It started and it's been good so far. It's really sunny outside and about 68 degrees.
Hold on. I don't know what 68 degrees means. Let me find out. 68 Fahrenheit to Celsius here. Oh, 20 degrees. That's nice. That's about what we're sitting at over here too. Very nice.
Yeah, I'm over near Traverse. I'm over near Traverse City, Michigan, so I think we're probably in the same climate zone.
Yeah, we're pretty close. I think though, during winter, you probably get more snow than I do.
Yeah, and I'm 5 minutes from Lake Michigan, so I get that lake effect too.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty close to. I'm so geographically inept, but 2 of the Great Lakes.
Oh yeah, probably Ontario or Huron. I would imagine Erie.
Maybe. Yeah. Erie, yeah, I think that one. I'm so bad with geography, but I'm by Niagara Falls, right? So we have a lot of water, but we have the escarpment. So that is what protects us from like the mass amounts of snow. So our friends just across the border there, y'all always get a lot more snow than we do. At least in my little hole here.
Yeah, it's I like it. It's good.
I hate snow. Anyways, we're not going to talk about that because it is summertime. And tell us a little bit, though, about who Brian Fleming is.
I enjoy pina coladas and long walks on the beach.
Oh, me too.
I know, right? That's a good opening, right?
I like it.
Now, I grew up in Southern Michigan. I joined the United States Army when I was 18 years old, straight out of high school in Miami, Florida. And this was in 2003. So it was post 9/11. We had been in Afghanistan for a couple of years at that point. And I decided I was really tired of studying because I studied my brains out and I needed a break. Yeah. We had also, my country had been attacked and obviously something had to be done and was being done. And so I joined that effort. I figured I put a couple years of my life into, doing something for my country, given, what was happening and the high potential it could happen again if nothing was done. Yeah. And so I did that and I deployed to Afghanistan in 2006 with the U.S. Army's 10th Mountain Division, where I was a team leader in an infantry platoon.
Wow, that's really cool. So, okay, I know you said that you had studied your brains out and you kind of gave us a little bit of your thought process for joining, but what, because I'm assuming, I have no idea, this is my assumption, I could be totally wrong, that joining the Army is very scary. Especially at that time, because there was that whole war going on with Afghanistan, right? Like, were you scared? I would have been scared.
I wasn't. I had asked a lot of very serious questions about life, God, existence very early on. And I'd also had some really pretty awful experiences as a kid somewhat. And so I had sort of, I think to some extent, already reckoned with death. And to an extent, not that any 18-year-old kid out there is just reckoned with death. I mean, of course, that's the most dangerous person in the world who is not afraid to die. And I met some of those people. We'll talk about that. But they came from a little different perspective and direction than me. But all I knew is that, I had friends who, their families literally died in New York City on 9/11. Yeah. And you get to a point when with something like that, you get to the point where it doesn't matter if you're scared if you have to protect your family. You do stuff afraid. And so I really didn't face a lot of fear joining. I knew what I was getting myself into. Some people want to say, oh, you're young and brainwashed. You didn't know what you're doing. I knew exactly what I was doing. And I didn't join the army as somebody who worked behind a desk or as an accountant. I joined as infantry. And infantry, if you don't know, their job is to go out and pick fights with bad guys. We go out and we find them. We don't wait around and we pick fights. And so that was the job I signed up for. And I take
Mhm.
full responsibility for my own injury, by the way, that we'll talk about. People ask me, do you blame the enemy who tried to kill you for being injured? I say, well, I blame him 50%. The other 50% is me joining the army during a time of war and putting
Yeah.
myself in a place where that could happen. And it did.
Mhm.
But I have no problem owning that.
Well, that's good. Yeah. So I very clearly remember when 9/11 happened. So I was in grade 9. And I try to explain this to my kids because obviously they have lived in a world where, not to say that war is doesn't happen, but it's not in their face
Yeah.
the way that it was. Like even the Russian Ukraine thing, it's not been in their face the same way that 9/11 was, and kind of still for those of us who were around who remember it, kind of still like we remember it. So I was in grade 9, I was at high school, and all of a sudden the announcements come on. And I don't remember exactly what they said because I mean, that's a long time ago. But I remember them talking about something so devastating. And if you needed to call home, come to the office. You can call home. They will help you. If you wanted to see what was happening, go into the library or the cafeteria. They had all the TVs set up. So basically, the school shut down, right? Because the thought process where I live, because we are right by Niagara Falls, was holy shit, what if we're next? Because
Hmm.
we do have the giant power station and stuff. That was a very real threat where I live. And so I remember going to the library and we watched it, and then all the news reports, you could watch the planes hit the towers, and it was insane. Like, it was just, how is this reality? Um, my husband, who was at a different school, he's told me his experience. His school did not let them watch the news. They pretended like it wasn't happening. And he lives in the same region as I do.
Mm,
Catholic board, I was in the public board, so maybe that's the difference. But they were trying to just continue on with their day.
mm.
Even though some of the teachers were like going home and just, awful because you might know somebody there, like you said, right? So
Yeah.
it was, so when he told me that, I go, "Seriously? You didn't just," he goes, "Well, I just stopped and I went and found a TV to watch," but they weren't letting them, whereas my school was like, "Go, see this, call home, do whatever you have to do."
Mine was like yours, and it was a public school in Florida. Yeah. They were like, I was second period Spanish class. The teacher turned on the TV. And, I don't know why the school wouldn't let, kids
Why
know about that.
not?
I think, I mean, from a administration perspective, maybe it's more like let's notify parents, or, as parents call them,
Maybe.
maybe let their parents break it to them, or
Could be.
who knows? Yeah. But yeah,
Yeah, 'cause
definitely different. I went to a Catholic school earlier on in life, so I've been on both sides of that weird fence.
oh, there you go. Well, and, like, you didn't have smartphones at the time, right? Like, you couldn't just go
No.
on your phone to find the news. So it could be, yeah, we're gonna just let the parents break it to them, because now there'd be no waiting for parents nowadays, because you'd get all the notifications and you'd scroll on your whatever and see
Oh,
it
the
all,
kids would be telling the teachers about it. Yeah.
right? For sure. Whereas back then, if they didn't tell you, like, you had a brick of a phone.
Yeah, and probably it was one of the last years I may have had a pager.
Yeah, exactly. Payphones still existed, the good
Payphone
old days.
banks.
Right? Exactly. So, very scary, very, very scary. And I just remember that everybody talking about, oh, we're gonna be next, they're gonna hit Niagara Falls, they're gonna do the power station, and um reading all the news and hearing all the news when all the other planes were landing in, like, out east, and everybody just
Mhm.
kind of helping out. It was a really good thing from a very bad thing.
Well, that's the way you have to think in a situation like that. You can't put any possibility out of question of, hey, we might be next. If you have a giant power station, that's a very valid target if
Mhm.
if the enemy's trying to do something. And you did have that airplane go down in that field in Pennsylvania, which
Mhm.
again is not far. I don't recall what direction it was going when it went down, but
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah, pretty wild. So yeah,
Exactly.
that
Who
that was
who
the world
knows?
we were living in, and I just tell people, if people came into your, and I'm talking normally I'm talking to men when I say this kind of thing, but it's to everybody. If someone comes into your neighborhood with a gun, you don't, at least from my perspective, you don't just hide. You go, everybody goes and gets their guns, and you go hunt that son of a bitch. Like
No,
you
we
don't, yeah,
can't do
you
that
don't.
in Canada.
Oh, we can in America. And if you don't have a gun, you get your pitchforks and your samurai swords and your
There you
rocks
go.
and your
We could get some
tasers.
rocks and stuff.
Yeah, well, you don't just get attacked and then sit there. I mean, the best, defense sometimes is offense. You have to get the enemy's head down.
Yeah.
You
Okay,
know,
so you made that decision. As a parent, I would be totally freaking out sending my baby across, but also I feel like I'd also try to be like, I'm so proud of you. Very mixed emotions.
my
But
mother had both of those because my brother was in the United States Marine Corps,
oh, there you go.
about to graduate, 2 weeks away from graduating boot camp when 9/11 happened, and then I left her home a couple years later to go in the military, and so yeah, it wasn't a mother's choice for sure for either of her only two sons, but
Right.
yeah,
But you came back, and that's important.
I did.
Um, so let's talk about some of that experience over there because I know that you've got some stories and some stuff.
Yeah, it was interesting. I deployed in 2006 to Afghanistan, arrived there in mid-March, and about a month after arriving there, my vehicle ran over a double stack of anti-tank bombs buried in the road, and it blew up the vehicle, set it on fire, completely destroyed it. Two guys were injured. I was not injured, and both of them thankfully returned to duty a month later. And
Wow.
then a couple months after that, on July 24th of 2006, I was going to Kandahar Airfield, the main base in Kandahar in southern Afghanistan, and I was the truck commander, so I was in the front passenger seat of the lead vehicle of about a 15 vehicle convoy, and I was about I think 20 or 21 years old at this point, and I we got about two miles from the main gate to Kandahar Airfield, and a minivan out of nowhere pulled right up next to my door and slammed into it and exploded. It blew, suicide bomber driving it blew himself and his van into about a million pieces. And I don't remember an explosion happening.
Mhm.
All I remember is waking up, laying face down on the side of Highway 1 in Kandahar in a ditch. I didn't know what happened. I had blood pouring out of my face. I had full face and neck second-degree burns, which have healed. Third-degree burns on both my hands. And at first I thought, why would I go to sleep here? Because I didn't remember laying down there. Thought, why am I? I was very disoriented. And
Yeah, yeah.
then I thought, well, shit, maybe we're in a firefight. Well, I didn't have my weapon and nobody was shooting, so I thought, okay, my weapon was still in the vehicle. I was not. And then I just sort of did a push up, got to my feet. My helmet wasn't on my head. I had no idea where it was, and I just sort of was stumbling around, just kind of trying to get my wits about me. And my medic was taking care of my gunner, who also sustained burns, but also took shrapnel to the face. And within about a half hour, a medevac helicopter came in, and my buddy Mike, who was the medic, he was uninjured, thankfully. He took care of me. He took care of the gunner. He called in the medevac helicopter. He operated flawlessly under pressure, and I'm so proud of him and
Wow.
grateful to him. And yeah, I went back. I was sent back to the States, and I spent 14 months at Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas. Burn treatment, reconstructive surgery, treatment for uh, traumatic brain injury, head injuries, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
How
was it
long?
was it was one of those days when you wake up and nothing goes right. You wake up and you have a bad year.
Just a whole bad year. I like
Yeah, it's like,
I
oh,
don't
your
like it
next year and a
for
half's
you,
going to be different. Yeah,
right? So, okay, so you joined at 18 and you were like 21. So you had been in there about 3 years?
yeah, like 2.5 or 3 years, I think,
2.5,
by the
3,
time I
yeah.
deployed. Yeah.
Wow. And how, just because we've already said that your mom, both her boys had to go do that. How is she? Like as a mom, I just keep thinking from a mom perspective, going, oh my gosh.
It was everything you would probably think as a mother. Mothers are very much, I think, similar in that kind of scenario. But
Yeah.
you can't stop your young adult,
Oh,
child from doing what they want with their lives, and you have to sort of let go. And fortunately, my brother and I are both doing very well
good.
nowadays. And so,
Good.
yeah,
Yeah, that's so scary. All right. So you said 14 months. of having to basically come back from that incident. How was that mentally?
Well, yeah, the first night at Brooke Army Medical Center was probably the worst physically, and I'll get into the mental
Mhm.
right after that because I didn't know what they had to do. If you know anyone who's been severely burned before, they have to do a process called debridement, where they have to get all the burned, charred, dirty skin off your body. So imagine
Oh.
like a burnt piece of chicken, and you've got to get the burnt skin off it because you can die of infection.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so when I arrived at the medical center, they took me into the shower room, and I remember the head nurse looking at me, and he said, "Sergeant Fleming, we're going to do this as quickly as possible, so it'll be as painless as possible." And I had no idea what he was talking about. My medic did me a favor not telling me what they're going to have to do. And so at that point, him and about two or three other nurses, they all pulled out razor blades, and they had to start shaving and tearing and ripping the burned, charred skin
Oh.
off of my hands, face, and neck. And that was the worst part of the whole injury. That was the most physical pain I've ever been in, and I wanted to fight them. It was torturous,
Yeah.
but I knew if I resisted, I mean, they were trying to save me, and I knew it. But in your head, you want to survive, but also you're trying to be out of pain, but you know they're helping. I knew it was just going to prolong it if I fought them, and
Yeah.
so I just sort of laid there and took it, and it lasted about 30 minutes. I was told it seemed like eternity to me, but
Yeah, I could
you know,
imagine.
I have friends who are burned on, completely all over their body who had to go through that. So I can't even imagine what they've had to face 80, 90+% burns. And so, anyone who's ever been through so much pain that you just prayed to die, like I
Mhm.
understand what it's like to be there. If I could just go to sleep, be unconscious, whether that's dead or asleep, that was the point I was at. I've never been suicidal. I've
Mhm.
never had the guts to think to do it myself, but I know what it's like to be in so much pain. I just don't want to live anymore. And I can tell
Mhm.
you, one of the weird things about being in that place, I call it the fog of war because you're in your own situation. You can only see maybe 5 or 10 feet in front of you. Everything's foggy per se, and you can't see the bigger picture of where you can be in 2 or 3 or 5 months or 5 years, or how life is or can really truly get better
Mhm.
because you're in that survival mode. You're trying to get through that, and that's all your brain can kind of focus on at the time when you're going through something like that is just focusing on that survival and all the stress that comes with that. But there is more light at the end of the tunnel. But for each person, it's a different path, and sometimes it's shorter or a longer path.
Mhm. Wow. Yeah, I didn't realize that they like I haven't known anyone or had anyone guest on the show that's had severe burns, so I didn't realize that like the rate like they would razor blade it off. But that description you used of the burnt chicken, yeah, that was very vivid. So after that first day, how'd it go?
Well, for the next 14 months, I had, at one point I had reconstructive surgery, so they took skin from. Well, the doctor told me they were gonna take skin from my rear end. That's where they usually start for grafting skin. They take it
Okay.
from there, and then for some reason he told me they might have to skin graft my face. Now I was on a lot of morphine and painkillers, and I thought, did he just tell me they're gonna take skin from my ass and put it on my face? And I'm thinking he didn't just say that. I'm looking at my wife thinking she'll never kiss me again. I'm thinking all those names I was called as a kid would be true, and I can't live with that. I'm literally thinking, I also thought, damn, I'm so glad I don't have a tattoo there because then it would be on my face and it'd be weird. Is it the drugs or why did he say that? Well, they ended up not having to do that. They did have to skin graft my hands, but they took the skin from the front of my legs instead of my rear end. So it's still a little bit weird if someone shakes my hand. I tell them, "Don't worry, you're not touching my butt." But you
And
are
they're like,
touching.
"What?"
Yeah, it's like you are touching my leg, but let's not make it weird. It's not that much more weird. But yeah, so there was that. I had to learn how to use my hands again because occupational physical therapy because the skin
Mhm.
grafts shrink once they put them on, and so it went over
Oh.
my knuckles, and so I couldn't do anything more than make a fist at
Oh.
one point, and I had to literally do this for like 6 or 8 months, and eventually I was able to go all the way down into a fist. And
Mhm.
so I have full functionality again. I'm not missing any limbs. I'm, physically in pretty good shape, thankfully. I'm very fortunate. A lot of my
Mhm.
friends and people like me who went through similar situations, they either didn't survive it or they came out just in far worse physical shape. And I don't know why I recovered so well, but I'm grateful. I don't know why.
And you probably never will.
And
Um,
I'm okay with that. I don't let things like that hang over my head.
mhm, mhm. Okay, so let's talk about that mental side. So you did mention being in so much pain that, just end it, whether it's just go to sleep or die or whatever it is. And I mean, obviously I've not had the same experience as you or nothing even relatively close, but that the pain and wanting the pain to just stop and
Mhm.
whatever has to happen to make the pain stop, that I do have some similar experience with.
Well, and that's an important point because a lot of people think somebody can't help them if they haven't, quote, been in their shoes or the
Mhm.
same situation. But to your point, we don't need to have been through the same thing as someone else to relate to them because the effect, the symptoms, the effects of what we've been through that is different in terms of pain
Mhm.
often very often produces the same outcomes and struggles that we have. So my stuff may have been caused by a suicide bomber, but your stuff may have been, I don't know your story, but something else, things you've been through that are different than what I've experienced. But we can both come out and we've dealt with maybe post traumatic stress in this particular way or fashion.
Mhm.
And that's where I hope everyone understands that that's where we truly relate because pain is a universal language that we all speak and it
Yeah.
transcends every barrier society wants to throw at you, from race to religion to sexual orientation to culture to nationality.
Mhm.
Everybody understands pain.
Yeah, and it can suck. So my just so everybody can get a clearer picture and maybe relate to themselves, there's two moments that are flashing in my mind as we're talking about pain. One, right after I had my hysterectomy, so cervical cancer, had a full hysterectomy. Wake up after the surgery, the amount of pain I was almost convulsing because it hurt so bad waking up from that surgery. The nurses had to rush over and remind me what had happened because again, you're on all those drugs or whatever. Remind me what had happened. Help me to slow my breathing down because obviously panicking and freaking out made it worse. And then of course they gave me more drugs to help with it because it was worse than childbirth. Like it was the worst pain I had ever felt before. And then the other times is and I have shared this a little bit on the show. So I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia and arthritis all throughout my body and stuff now. And there are days that literally I am on the floor crying because I'm burning from the inside out.
Mm.
Right. So very different situation. And I think what you have said is all, I just want to reiterate that we have different circumstances that led to it, but pain is universal. So when I am burning from the inside out and I am on the floor crying, I've been on my kitchen floor crying because I can't crawl to the bathroom. Um, Pain is pain. And so hearing Brian's story, I mean, you might not have been through the same thing, but I definitely think people can relate to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I never thought of quote giving up. People say, man, how are you so resilient? Here's the truth. I didn't die. Like if you get in a car accident and people say, why you survived it, how'd you survive? Like, well, one, I didn't die. And as humans, yeah, it's like as humans, well, if you survive, you just kind of have to get through it. I'm
Mhm.
not I'm not some sort of Superman with some, you know, above or beyond human ability to be resilient. I've been through some really bad shit in my life, even before the military, and that does toughen you.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, it's like the harder things you go through, the tougher you become, and it allows you to be tougher through even more difficult circumstances later in life. That's
Mhm.
just kind of the way life seems to be set up. But the first time I shared my story, someone put me on their stage for about 2 minutes, and I said what happened. And I was still in burn bandages. I still looked burned at the time.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, 3,000 people showed up at this event. And the guy who became my mentor, one of my best friends and mentors, and he taught me how to speak and share my story. He pulled me on a stage out of just randomly. He said, "Hey, come to my event." Then he yanked me on stage. And
Oh, jeez.
yeah, now he was a Vietnam veteran who was injured severely in Vietnam. And so he knew what he was doing. This was unconventional therapy. I didn't know what I was walking into. But after I got off stage, my life changed. I met
Mhm.
a young lady who was about my age at the time, early mid-20s, and she said, "You know, Brian," she just walked up to me. I don't even know her name. She said, "Growing up, I was raped and molested many times. As a teenager, it continued. My boyfriend was abusive. He broke up with me recently, and 2 weeks ago, I tried to kill myself, but I failed." And she just left it there. And what do you say to somebody like that? But then
Right.
she said this. She goes, "You know, but if you can survive all that," talking about Afghanistan and the injury, she said, "I think I can get through this." And something came out of me I didn't know was in me. And people say I helped her, but I didn't have any advice. But she equally helped me because here's what happened. I knew this young lady's not going to go home and drink a bottle of pills tonight. She's
Mhm.
not going to go home and put a gun in her mouth and pull the trigger.
Mhm.
She had one more not 10 miles to go. She had one next step of hope to take, and she took it that day because of her belief about, if he can get through his thing, maybe I can get through mine. That's all it takes sometimes. And I told my mentor that night, I have whatever happened tonight, I don't know, but I have to do this. And I didn't know for years what happened in that moment until one day I was reading I was reading a book by Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor. He was an Austrian Jew, a psychiatrist, and he said this about suffering. He survived the Holocaust and maintained his wits. And he said, when it comes to suffering, he said, in some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. And I'll say that again. In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. Well, what happened in that moment when I realized this lady said, "Hey, I've been through all this and I failed suicide 2 weeks ago. But if you can get through that, I think I can keep going too." I found a sense of meaning in my suffering. And
Mhm.
here's where people commit suicide, I'm told, is when they're in a state of absolute despair. And my understanding is the textbook definition of despair is basically a complete loss of hope. Zero hope, none. Viktor
Mhm.
Frankl, he had his own definition of despair. He said despair is suffering without meaning. So somebody's suffering and they just can't make sense of it. They don't believe there's any reason for it, or they'll never find reason for it. There's no hope. And that's when people get really, really to that really dangerous point where they might do something they never considered doing. And I
Mhm.
can imagine, especially if you're in some sort of intense pain. I think at the end of the day, we all just want the pain to go away.
Yeah.
But I found it, if anyone's wondering, how did I get through so much of what I went through? I realized there were a few things that some of the world's most resilient people have in common. There are a number of things, but I identified three. And here's what's weird. Over the year and 2 months I was at the hospital, and about within the year of getting out of the military afterwards, I realized years later I had all three of these things present in my life and I did not know it. And I attribute these things to why I was able to bounce back and recover as quickly as I was able. I found a sense of meaning in my suffering, like meeting that young lady and now having met so many other people.
Mhm.
I had a mentor in my life, someone to help guide me who I trusted, who understood me, and had the credibility to help me. He understood my pain for more. He had been through it himself. And then he taught me how to use my story, how to share my story through speaking and helping people. And that's what he had done with his life, I think, for about 35 years at the point I met him. And
Wow.
then, yeah, so there was a sense of meaning. I had a mentor, and because I met that young lady and I got that sense of meaning, that that turned quickly into finding my next mission in life, having gone through what I went through. I wanted
Mhm.
to speak and share my story for the purpose of finding other people and teaching them, not just telling my story and projecting on them, but saying, "Hey, here are some lessons I learned that I think can relate to your life," and then try to help them relate it so they can win the battle they're facing. So I had a strong sense of meaning in the suffering within about 7 months, which is very recent I mean, I was injured
Yeah.
on July 24th, and I spoke the first time I spoke, it was on March 15th, like 6 or 7 months later. So I had a
Wow.
sense of meaning, I had a mentor in my life, and I had a new mission in life that I was pursuing that was bigger than me. If you have all 3 of those things in your life, you're in an incredible place no matter what you've been through. But when you lack one or more or all of those, that's where things get really, really rough.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Because as you're talking, I'm like, because I've definitely plotted out how to end myself. Never did it. Obviously, I'm still here. I'm not a ghost. Um, but
Good to know. Good to know.
yeah,
Thank you for
I'm
clarifying.
not a ghost. Yes, you're welcome. Or a zombie. Just want to throw that one out there too.
Oh, there's those too. Yeah.
Right?
Now those are on the news media.
Oh, where my brain takes me. But once I found the purpose, the bigger purpose of all the suffering, which is the show and the books that I write and all that fun stuff,
Mm,
that is, yeah, that really has propelled me in the direction of a much happier and resilient, because that's such a good word, resilient life. Because now I understand, yeah, I may have went through whole bunch of crap. But you know what? First off, I'm not alone. That's one of the biggest things I always like to say to people. You are not alone.
mhm.
Because one of the worst things is to feel that. And I think that's where that whole having a mentor comes in, right? They understand it. And then having that purpose, like you said, figuring out what it is that I could do with whatever. And even this just popped into my head, even those that aren't necessarily trying to get over, like a traumatic experience or anything. They always there's that saying, if you find the job you love, it's not a job anymore. It's
Mhm.
that's what it makes me think of, right? Finding your purpose. The pain is, yeah, the pain is there. It doesn't necessarily go away, but making sense of that pain makes a really big difference.
Yeah, and I don't know how much of what your personal pain has contributed to you doing this podcast and writing your books, but it is not uncommon that because of what you've been through, that may have been the seed that ended up producing everything you do now. Is that true in your life?
I'd say pretty darn close. Like, let's go like 98%.
Okay. So like a lot of what you do now has come about because of your challenges is what you're saying.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah,
Definitely.
and but that's something people need to understand that they don't know enough to know it's over.
Mhm.
Because when you think it's over, you don't know enough, and to know that it is, you don't know what else is possible. And a lot of people when they feel like giving up, I'm not saying this is everybody, but I do long distance running. I'm a distance runner. And I'll tell you when in my experience from running and the military and all that came with that, when people feel like giving up, they think it's like the end of their rope, the end of their ability. When you
Mhm.
feel like giving up, you're probably only at about 40% of your full capacity. Because let's say you're tired and you're running. Well, if someone was to unleash a pit bull to chase you, it's amazing how suddenly you wouldn't have to think twice. You would end up running faster or something of that nature. And I know
Right?
that's kind of a funny example, but it's amazing what we're able to do and what we're capable of when we absolutely have to do something, even if we think we can't, when there's no choice. If someone's like, Brian, you have to run down the road, you have to be here in 10 minutes, or you'll never see your daughter again. Like,
You're gonna
I'm
get
gonna be
there.
there. Like, I'm getting there. Like that's the only thing that matters. I'm getting there. And so when you feel like giving up, most people are just at the point of their current level of maximum discomfort. It's not the limit of your full capacity and ability. It's the limit where you're extremely and maximally uncomfortable and you've never transcended that. You've never gone past that. But you have a
Mhm.
lot more ability way beyond that. You just most people don't explore it because that discomfort can be so painful sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, so I used to run, not long distances, but I used to run, as part of my training for kickboxing.
Mm.
And something that we used to say in kickboxing is you'd be like, "Oh, I'm so tired. I hit my wall. I'm so tired." And of course the coach is going, "No, you didn't. Go through the wall. You okay, you hit the wall. Now go through the wall." right? So it's very similar. You've hit it because, oh, I'm dying. I can't breathe anymore. I can't keep my arms up. Well, you know what? The round's not over yet. The fight's not over yet.
You're just
You
gonna
have
stand there
to
and
keep going,
just gonna stand there and get kicked in the face? Is that what you're gonna do?
right?
Oh, okay. So, well, and when you get through something like that, you realize, wow, I had way more in me than I thought, and
Mhm.
that's the kind of thing where confidence comes from. I spoke for who was it? Bank of America at their big headquarters a couple years ago down in North Carolina, and one of the audience members, they said they asked me, how can I help my kids be more resilient? And I said, make them do hard things every day.
Yeah.
Because you can't be resilient. You can't develop your mental toughness if you aren't challenging yourself and getting used to challenges and change and adapting, because that's all life is.
Mhm. That's such a good point. Actually, my kid is just graduated. I've shared that from high school, about to go to college, which is a really big deal. So this is we're talking about my youngest one that has autism. We get to pick the class schedule tomorrow morning. All right. And he has not left the house for school basically in 3 years. He has done all of his high school from home online. He is now taking baking and pastry arts. He has no choice but to leave the house. So this is that whole, you know what? You've got something more in you. You know it. I know it. You can do it. I mean, we're all kind of taking bets if he's gonna make it through the semester or not. But the fact that he's willing to try
Mhm.
is the biggest deal ever. And
Well, you
so,
know what? And he was naturally made for this too. To
oh
go out, to be in new environments, adapt to them, learn, grow. That's how we're wired as humans.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
scary. He's
I
he's
oh, I
very
understand.
scared,
I
but he's
understand that
gonna do
because
it.
my 15-year-old's taking driver's training here in a few weeks, and I'm scared to death to be sitting in that passenger seat.
Oh, I
not that I don't
know.
trust him, but like other people, and so
Well, that's
I
what I
understand what you're
said to
saying.
mine. So what I said to both of mine when they learned to drive, I was like, "It's not that I don't trust you, but I don't trust everybody else. And
Yeah.
you are brand new at seeing what is going to happen." Right? So as the driver who's been driving for 20 years, it's like you're going along, you're like, "Oh, that guy's not stopping. He's supposed to be stopping, but he's not stopping, so I'm gonna stop." Whereas as a new driver, you're like, "They have to stop. It's the rules." Right?
Yeah, because
But
people
they're not.
follow those.
Right? Exactly. So it's not that I don't trust you driving, it's that I don't trust anybody else around you. So, oh, I wish
Yeah.
you good luck as a parent with a new driver. Who actually
Yeah.
my day job, I work in the office of a driving school. So I get
Hmm.
to talk to all those parents that are like, I haven't taken them out because I'm really scared to do so. I'm like, that's okay. We got you. It's fine. I don't think I could ever actually be the driver instructor. It's funny, I applied when I got this job, I applied to be a driving instructor at the time because 'cause I'm like, "I'm good at teaching people stuff." I don't think I could do it, actually.
Yeah, they can't pay you enough money for the potential of personal risk.
Right? Like, I know they have the driver brake on their side, but, I mean, there's only so much a brake can do for you. So
Yeah.
and some of the stories I hear, "No, thank you. No, thank you."
Yeah, that'd be especially difficult for someone like yourself who's in that environment regularly. I get the gift of ignorance where I'm not around and hearing all those stories.
Yep, exactly. I hear them and I'm just like, "I am glad I'm in the office." So I always like to pose one last question before we talk about kind of what you're here, whatever you're wanting to promote, your books or your talking or whatever. Um, so the question I'm going to pose to you, because I always make it for that person. What piece of wisdom would you give to somebody who is in so much pain, whether it's emotionally or physically, that they don't see the other side?
Yeah, one of my best pieces of advice would be find a good friend that you can call at 2 in the morning. Be careful who you trust, but find the one find someone you can that can sort of be your wingman, your wing girl. We call it in the army that your battle buddy because you go nowhere alone. This is the person who, you know, if there's nowhere to sleep in the middle of the night and you're behind enemy lines, you can sit up against each other and keep each other awake. I always say, there are people who say, again, you don't understand what I've been through, therefore you can't help me. That's bullshit. I
Mhm.
promise. I used to say it, and it's common. It's just bullshit. And here's why. In Afghanistan, we had what we call close air support. My little 17-man platoon operating in the mountains in the middle of nowhere in this godforsaken country, hunting other people who were also hunting us. We had what's called close air support. These are war helicopters and planes that would circle over top of our battlefield. Here's the thing. They can see things on our battlefield that we could not because we're on our feet, we're on the ground. They could say, "Hey, don't go over that ridge line, 500 meters away. There's 100 enemy on the other side." Well, we couldn't see that, but thank God they were flying overhead and they were able to look down and see. So this is why people don't have to have gone through the same thing. You have to understand or be able to help you. They might not understand. The pilot in the A-10 Warthog attack plane, that pilot doesn't know what it's like to be an infantry guy on the ground. He doesn't have to, but he can see my battlefield from a different perspective, and he's not inhibited by the same obstacles that are blinding me, my own blind spots. He can see from a different perspective and say, hey, maybe step here, don't step there, because here's what I'm seeing from over here. So that's the difference between, think about if you're walking across a minefield and somebody's saying, hey, 2 steps left, 1 forward, 3 to the right, 2 forward, because they know where the bombs are. And if you don't want to step on one, you don't just cast faith to the wind and run across it. You
Mhm.
listen to what they tell you as they guide you. And sometimes that could be one person, it could be multiple, it could be a counselor, a best friend, someone who's been through it themselves, or the most unlikely person in the world you would disqualify in a heartbeat because you don't understand how they could possibly help you. But sometimes that's the person that can help you the most. So that combined with just find someone who can be your battle buddy, and it's you don't know enough to know that everything is over with. You don't know enough to know
Mhm.
this is the end. And you don't need 10 miles of advice. You just need your next step. When you're in a
Mhm.
really bad place mentally, most people just need the next hopeful step. Like, just tell me one step to take. And this one step right now, find someone you can talk to.
That was all amazing. The one thing, finding that next step. And I've said it before. Frozen 2. Have you seen Frozen 2?
I tried to let it go on the first one, pun intended. I believe I did though.
Frozen 2, I love that one far more, as an adult. I don't My grandson likes the first one more, but whatever. So, Frozen 2, I've watched it a bajillion times because when my grandson was teething, so he's, like, 6 months old and he's teething, it was the only thing that would calm him down. He'd watch Frozen, we'd rock him back and forth, and he would finally calm down. Frozen 2. So, in that movie, the reason I bring it up, um, it's been out long enough, so if you haven't seen it, too bad for this spoiler, but Elsa freezes to death. And Anna feels the like so she can't see it, but she feels that it's happened because Olaf also flurries away. And she sings this song about finding the next right thing, just the next step, because she is so devastated by losing not only her sister, but one of her best friends.
Mm.
She's all alone in this cave. What am I gonna do? Total despair. It is one of the most brilliant depressive come out of depression songs for kids ever. I highly recommend watching that movie. I've
Wow.
said it
I'm gonna have to,
before.
I'm gonna have to go look at that now.
Yeah, so she just sings about the next step. I don't know where I'm going to go, but then I just need one step and then one step and then one step.
That's some
It's
good
amazing.
screenwriting.
Oh, that movie was so full of mental health stuff in it. It's just so good.
I'm glad people are able to write stories so well and integrate things like that. That
Yeah.
where it's so easy to understand. Yeah.
Right? It was just brilliantly done. Like, it wasn't like it was shoved down your throat. I don't like those ones, but this one was just so brilliantly done. I love that movie. All right, everybody go watch it if you haven't. So let's talk about what you've written, what you're up to right now.
Yeah, I have a website called, well, one, if you want to see what I do with speaking or book me to speak, just go to blownupguy.com because I'm a guy and I got blown up. So I bought that when I looked blown up. I don't look blown up anymore, but I
You
do
just like use it.
yeah, I give keynote speeches now and for different companies, organizations, but to say that, I say that to say, over the years, I've had a lot of people ask me, Brian, how do you do it? How do I do what you do? I have a story and I want to share my story and be a speaker too. So I created Use Your Story at useyourstory.com. And if you go there, I have a free resource called the Share Your Story Roadmap. It's a one-page PDF download along with a very short video that accompanies it. And I show you how to use your story and make a difference and also make your first $500 speaking. Now, here's why that's important. Money is the grease on the machine that makes the world go around. If you cannot be financially productive with what you're doing, it won't go anywhere. So I hope people don't look at this and go, "Oh, it's just a marketing gimmick." No, and once you understand you can go out and in 20 or 30 minutes make $500 just telling your story, if you do it the way I show you for free, a whole world opens up. Not only do you help people and do you get more opportunities, but then you realize, oh, I could make even more than that. I mean, most people, if they could do that twice a month, an extra $1,000 in their pocket, they could raise their own kid at home without having to go work, or it could change their lifestyle. It could get them out of
Mhm.
debt. And that's for, you could be doing 40 to 60 minutes of work, sharing your story at a couple places. And that's on the very, very, very low end in speaking. But I put it there because it's practical for most people. If I said you can go make 5 or 10 grand an hour, a lot of people just go, "Oh, that's not practical for me." Even though I've been doing it for over 16 years, there's huge budgets for speakers. But this is the starting point I would start at if I was starting over right now. Is I would follow this very simple 6 to 7 step roadmap. Just go do it. And you can not only help people sharing your story from a place of value and helping them, but also make your first $500 speaking. So go grab that at useyourstory.com.
Oh my god, just might have to. Um, and so I know you've already given your websites, but are you on social media? Can we follow you?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook, Instagram as, generally just Brian C. Fleming.
Okay. So what's the C stand for? And I'm nosy.
Christopher. I was born on Columbus Day in 1984.
Oh, all right. Very cool.
Yeah, I didn't pick it because I was quite small at the time, but it's worked out.
I don't know if it's as funny to everyone else as it is to me, but my kid changed their name. So it didn't matter what I picked.
Oh, really? Oh, I can totally see why you're laughing now. That's
Right. And my biggest contention when they were trying to tell me that well, I mean, kids try to find themselves, all right? So
oh yeah.
when it came out and said I want to be 11 and I want to be known as he him, although I think we might be anyways, there's stuff. Um I was like, "But I worked so hard to find your name." Like, that was my big problem with it, was I worked so hard to name you when I was pregnant. You
You're
can't
like,
just
well,
take that away.
and they're like, oh yeah, just kind of did.
That was my biggest issue, so it's just yeah,
That's
it's super funny to
that
me, but
that
yeah.
is that is funny as a parent, but it
Right?
also, I have a friend who recently changed his name, and he's someone who came out, and had come from a very fundamentalist religious background. And he said the last part of coming out and dealing with all the all the stuff coming against him, he said changing his name was the absolute last beautiful nail in the coffin,
Yeah.
because it was such an identity marker of, I'm choosing who I am. This is who I am, not who I was told I was supposed to be.
Mhm.
There was something about changes in his name that was one of the most transformational pieces for the better for him. So
Mhm.
I can kind of see maybe where your kid's coming from, even though I haven't personally done it. I can imagine what that does for your transforming your own personal sense of identity, which,
Yeah.
can be a very healthy thing.
Right? Yeah, there was no anger about the whole thing other than, but I tried so hard.
I tried to pick a good one all those years ago, and
Right? Like, I pushed you out. I get to pick it. Like, come on. Anyways, thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your story. Yeah, it was. My brain does not want to work today, guys. I'm so sorry. But I'm toast. I'm toast. Um, what we've said it before, just because you have not gone through the exact same thing as somebody else does not mean that you cannot relate to the stories that are being shared on the show, right? You don't have to have gone through the same thing. You might be the one on the ground. Maybe you're the one in the helicopter. You don't have to have been through the exact same thing.
Yep.
I'm going to keep using that analogy. Just I've stolen it now.
Go for it. I probably didn't come up with it either. I don't know who did. If someone else did, who knows?
But I really like it.
Hey, if it helps people, that's what matters.
Exactly. So thank you so much again.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And I did not realize this when I got dressed this morning, but I obviously picked one of my merch, but this shirt I find fits this interview so well. I wasn't going to share it, but look at this one. Lived experience expert on a wall, because we talked about pushing past the wall. It's in the merch store. You guys can go get it. That's my little thing. But I just was like, what? I picked the shirt that actually we talked about pushing past the wall, and everybody's experience is different. It was kismet. As always, thank you so much for the amazing guests that we have on the show. Be sure to check out their links down in the description below. If you want to support the channel, go ahead and check out our merch store. We've got some very cool things on there. That's my favorite. Sorry, I'm busy ending the stigma. But there's some other very cool designs. 10% of the proceeds always goes back to the Canadian Mental Health Association. Be sure to follow us on Facebook at RB Media, because we have some great new shows coming up and you never want to miss any of those episodes. And remember, the only way to end the stigma of mental health is to speak openly and honestly. Bye.